Uh, okay. All right. Can you see my screen now, Andy?
Yes, what it covers, what it misses, and how to actually stay protected.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, you've probably have already heard a lot of this stuff from me because I know we've talked about cyber liability insurance in the past. But again, this is we're just going to pretend like that there's nine or ten other people that want to see this and they just couldn't make it for whatever today, and so we'll send them this recording. My name is Thomas Hill. I'm the CEO of CD Technology. We've been taking care of IT problems in the Knoxville area for almost 30 years now, and been specializing in taking care of business IT services for the past 10 plus years. So the reality check is that a lot of people think, oh, my small business is too small for cyber criminals to attack, and I think most people realize at this point that cyber criminals actually love small businesses because they know that the vast majority of the time the small businesses do not have the budget required to keep all their information safe. And the fact of the matter is that in any given year, 61% of all small and medium-sized businesses are going to be hit by some sort of a cyber attack of some kind. Um, the typical cost. So for I try to make my webinars for the average business that we take care of, which is usually somewhere between $1 and $5 million in sales. The actual cost, and a lot of times, is $120,000. Is if you get a significant enough cyber incident that really causes damage, that's probably what you're going to be looking at paying out. And then the really scary part is that it's not unusual for your business to be sidelined for nearly 3 weeks as you try and put the data back together and get operations back together. And that's really what this kind of comes down to is this is an operations issue. Cyber attacks, they do shut down businesses, and I see many businesses completely go out of business, have to file for bankruptcy because of it. And so, that's why we recommend cyber liability insurance. There's a lot of reasons. It used to be back in, um, let's see, let me look over my notes here real quick so I can get in the right place. Okay. So, you know, so what does the cyber liability insurance cover? Obviously data breaches, business interruption, ransomware attacks, and legal and regulatory issues. Um, do you know? So, Andy, do you know how long you have? Like, if you do have a data breach, how much time do you have to notify your customers? Do you know, Andy?
I do not.
Okay. So it depends on who's going to come down to you, whether it's a federal or a state issue and whether it's FTC or some other entity. But in most cases in the United States, you have between 30 and 60 days to notify your customers that you had a data breach. And that's why cyber liability insurance is so important because on average, it costs about $200 a person. If you have a data breach, it's going to cost you about $200 a person. So if you have 500 clients, that could easily be $100,000 in costs that it's going to cost you to notify those customers and provide them with the necessary software that's supposed to be in place for identity theft and that kind of thing. And so these are kind of the reasons why it's important to have cyber liability insurance. Another thing is the legal and regulatory. We kind of talked about the FTC and HIPAA fines and those kind of things. There's a great example is Cottage Healthcare in California not too long ago had a data breach, and they were fined $3 million from the Department of Human Services because they did not meet the minimum standards for cyber liability and making sure that everything was safe. And that's a big hospital in California. But I just recently read just last year a mom and pop CPA firm was hit with a $60,000 fine through the FTC safeguard rule. So these are again the reasons why you want to have cyber liability insurance in place is because if you do get hit by a cyber criminal, not only will it take out your business, but you have a lot of regulatory fees that you're going to have to answer to, and so that's one good reason to make sure that you have these things in place. Um, so, again, what does it cover in detail? You have two different things. You have first party and then third party. First party is going to protect you, for any costs that you have with data recovery, business interruption losses, ransomware payments, incident response. Um, and this incident response is interesting because a lot of people don't really think about this, but when a cyber criminal gets access to your data and everything, you're kind of in mode to try and put it all back together and get your business up and running. The problem is what if you don't follow a good incident response layout, and that actually has a way to learn from what it was that a cyber criminal was able to manage to get into your company's data, and you don't patch that for next time. I saw an interesting statistic that said 69% of all cyber attacks rehappen to the same company within 6 months. And again, this is because the cyber criminals know, well, you're still reeling from the first one. You probably haven't even had time to patch what the problem was, and so you may have gotten your systems back up and running, but you've not taken the time to make sure that you're patched and ready to go so that it doesn't happen again. And so, sadly enough, that happens a lot. I already kind of talked on the third party. Um, you know, of course, there could be customer lawsuits that cyber liability insurance protects against. I already talked about the notification cost in the last slide. On average, you've got to provide credit monitoring and all these other things for if those people's names get out, and you're responsible for that. And like I said, if you have just 500 customers, that could easily be $100,000. Um, so what cyber liability insurance doesn't cover. It doesn't cover neglect. It simply just investigates it. So, it is important that you, as a business owner, make sure that you have good processes in place. You need to make sure that, you're using multi-factor authentication across the entire board. In fact, I'll talk about somebody here in just a minute that was an issue. Um, Make sure that you're using good passwords. Basically you're making sure that you have a good process in place. Unpatched systems. Again, you need to make sure that you have a process in place. And again, I've got another story about another company that was an issue. Employee negligence. So if you have an employee um, that willfully destroys data, that's not a cyber liability insurance issue. That's going to be under a different type of insurance. And then non-compliance in general, which is basically saying that sure, I'm operating a financial services company, but I'm not abiding by the FTC rules and regulations, and so that's a non-compliance type of issue. So last year, 40% of all claims were denied, and that's a real number. So there was 40% of all cyber liability claims just flatly the insurance company said nope, we're not going to cover them. So here's a perfect example: International Control Services. They're out of Illinois. They manufacture electronics and cable harness wiring sets and that kind of thing. They had a breach not too long ago, and the insurance company said, no, we're not going to cover because your MFA was not implemented everywhere. And so they did have MFA implemented on certain things. So they had it, implemented in email and that kind of thing, but they did not have MFA turned on their on-premise servers, and that's how the cyber criminals were able to get in. Because of that, the insurance company was able to say, "Well, you said in your insurance document that you had MFA turned on. You signed right here saying that you did, and our teams are saying that you did not." And so, that's why they did not get a payout. Another case, kind of talked about Cottage Healthcare a little bit earlier out of California. They suffered a breach because of unpatched software. So these are basically an older system. So this was a situation where they were supposed to upgrade from I want to say it was Windows 10 to Windows XP. It's been several years, and they still had a whole bunch of Windows XP systems, and a cyber criminal was able to get in. Um, in that situation, they got a reduced payout because they were able to show that part of their network it was not as bad as it could have been, but still because of that they ended up collecting a whole lot less money, and ended up paying much more out of pocket. Um, so, these are perfect examples of why it's important to make sure that you fill out the survey properly. It used to be pre-COVID. If you had $500 and you said, "Hey, I wanted cyber liability insurance," then an insurance company was just going to give it to you, and probably didn't even ask any questions. But after COVID, it completely changed. And in fact, we're paying like $5,000 a month for a $2 million policy now, and we used to have like a $5 million policy for just $500 a month prior to COVID. So, and on top of that, now we get a form from the insurance company every year that says, "Hey, we need you to go through and fill out all these things." And it's asking really detailed questions. It's asking about, you know, if your 2FA is turned on what systems it's turned on. It's asking about specific endpoint security software. It's asking about training for your employees and staff. It's asking if you have appropriate documentation for if a breach was to happen, who is in charge and so forth. And these are all things that we never had to take care of before, but now all of a sudden you're seeing these documents that are 3, 4, 5 pages, and the problem is a lot of folks are just taking that document and they're like, "Oh, well, I've got an IT department, so I'm just going to say yes, 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 yes." So we're recommending that you do not do that anymore. If you get a survey from your insurance company, we highly recommend that you just forward that to your IT company and you let them fill that out. And don't be surprised if they come back to you and say, "Hey, listen, you've got yes on all these things here, but we're having to mark no on these things because you don't currently have that." We actually just had that show up not about 18 months, 2 years ago. We noticed on cyber liability forms that insurance companies were asking for not just regular endpoint security, but they wanted an enhanced detection and response endpoint security. And so that's why we started including it last year with all of our clients, because we saw that insurance companies were requiring it on their questionnaire. Um, but not a lot of IT companies are proactive like that as far as adding those things in automatically. And so that's why it's important to have your IT company actually go through and fill out that form for you. Um, so this is just kind of a list of things that we see that a lot of companies don't have in place that they think they do. Again, we kind of talked about MFA, and yes, people are kind of used to having MFA on their emails and stuff, but if you have an on-premise server, make sure that MFA is turned on that server as well. Employee security training, that's definitely an area where we see that business owners are not always thinking about for their staff. Make sure that you have an employee security training program in place, and make sure it's documented, because if you do have to submit a claim, excuse me, um, if you do have to submit a claim to the insurance company, they're going to want you to provide documentation showing that you provide employee security training, showing that you have, backups that are tested on a regular basis. Again, with our clientele, we do at least a yearly business review, and we provide that documentation to our customers. But again, for any customers that are not ours, that's something you're going to want to ask your IT company is, hey, do we have any documentation showing that we have secure backups, or we have endpoint detection and response software in place, or whatever it is that the cyber liability insurance company is asking for. So insurance is not a replacement for cybersecurity. They kind of go hand in hand. And so, this is just another layer. And I talk to my customers all the time about layers of an onion. And this is just yet another layer of that onion that you need to have in place in order to kind of keep your business safe from cyber criminals. So how do you lower your risk and lower your cost of premiums? Well, so first of all, again, make sure your IT company is taking a look at the survey, and make sure that when you get that survey back, all the answers are yes. If they are not yes, then you need to have a discussion with your IT company. Well, what is it that we're missing? And you need to kind of make a decision at that point as to whether it's going to be less expensive to pay the higher insurance premium, or is it better overall to implement whatever it is that you're missing in the security protocols. And again, this is just kind of a short list of things. But smart businesses, what they're doing is that they're making sure that the IT companies are setting up their IT to go along with the insurance survey, and that's how is the best way to keep your business safe. So kind of shorten that down just a little bit, since I knew that Andy was going to have to jump off here in just a little bit. But if anybody has any questions about cyber liability insurance, or wants to know if their company is ready to even apply for cyber liability insurance, you can certainly set up a meeting by just scanning the QR code there and set up a short call with me, and I can kind of walk through your specific situation.